A New York federal judge has threatened counsel for one of Sean Diddy Combs' former music producers with sanctions on Monday for a pattern of false statements and inappropriate insults in civil sexual assault litigation. The judge called one statement in the attorney's court filings not just disturbing, but shocking. So this news report comes along with all of the other news reports on our channel thus far about the Sean Diddy Combs federal prosecution and also all of these civil lawsuits that have come out of the woodworks where civil litigants are claiming to have been victims of Sean Combs' alleged sexual abuse in the past. So we're going to take a look today at an opinion that was issued by a federal judge sanctioning the counsel, the attorney, for a producer, Sean Diddy Combs. So let me go ahead and pull this up here and we're going to go right through it. So this is Judge Oetken, which is Oetken, and he included in this order what he described as a warning to Jones's lawyer, Tyrone Blackburn. The judge said that the dismissal briefing by Blackburn, who's already facing a pending disciplinary referral in another Manhattan federal case, is replete with inaccurate statements of law, conclusory accusations, and inappropriate ad hominem attacks on opposing counsel. And that's a mouthful, but what ad hominem attacks means is attacks on the person. So ad hominem attacks in the legal world means that you're attacking the person as opposed to attacking the legal claim or attacking the legal theory at issue, right? It's personal digs at the other attorney or at the litigant. And there are things called professional rules of conduct that attorneys are supposed to adhere to, the ethical code that states that you are to show respect and professionalism and candor at all times to litigants and also to the other attorneys in the case. Now, as we know, there's sometimes a lot of back and forth and heated battles that go on between adversaries, but really as attorneys, it's our role and our obligation to remain professional in that process. So let me go ahead and pull this up here. As you can see, this opinion that was issued by Judge Oetken says, the plaintiff brings this suit alleging, among other things, violations of RICO, which is the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, and also the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000, based on defendant Sean Combs' alleged sexual misconduct. Before the court are motions to dismiss filed by Combs, his business enterprises, and Christina Corin. For the reasons that follow, the motions are granted in part and denied in part. So then this is called a judicial opinion. So the judge, in making his rulings on certain motions that have been filed, he needs to go ahead and set forth a justification of his reasons and to express, these are the reasons for why I am ruling in this way. And the reason why judges will often choose to issue written opinions like this written opinion of Judge Oetken is because when they deny or grant a motion, the party who they're either denying or granting the request of can file an appeal. And sometimes in these hotly contested cases, litigants will ask to file an appeal. And the court is always going to want to set forth in writing its reasons for and justifications for why it ruled in the way that it did, so that if this case were to go up to the appellate division, the appellate court would see all those reasons set forth, and they would better be able to, the judge, to support or not support the trial judge's ruling. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back to this this opinion here. The court sets forth the factual background, stating that plaintiff Rodney Jones brought this action against Sean Combs, asserting a variety of claims based on Combs' alleged history of sexual assault and human trafficking. Named alongside Combs are Combs' son, Justin Dior Combs, and actor Cuba Gooding Jr. Combs' chief of staff, Christina Koren, his record label Love Records, his company Combs Global Enterprise, and an unidentified female described as Young Miami's cousin. Okay, so a lot of people are named here. A lot of people are involved. It's not just Sean Combs. And so the judge is making clear at the outset that these are all of the entities, all of the parties that are involved in this situation. So then the next page states that the Second Amendment complaint asserts 17 causes of action, of which 14 remain. So 3 of the initial claims have been dismissed or voluntarily, either dismissed by the court or voluntarily dismissed, and then 14 of those claims remain in the Second Amendment complaint. And these include 2 federal claims, which is a racketeer-influenced corrupt organization claim against Combs, Justin, Koren, Combs Global, and Love Records, and a TVPA claim against Combs, Justin, Koren, and Combs Global, and various state law claims against Combs and Cuba Gooding Jr., Jane Doe 1, and Love Records for breach of contract, sexual assault, premises liability, and infliction of emotional distress. So in addition to having a number of parties involved here, there are also a number of different types of claims involved here. So the judge is doing a great job of setting that forth all up front. The following facts are taken from Jones's complaint and are presumed true for purposes of this opinion, right? Because when you rule at the initial stages like this, you have to presume all facts are true in favor of the moving party, which is Jones. So Jones' claims stem from his work between September 2022 and September 2023 as a producer on Combs' Love album. During this time, Jones lived with Mr. Combs for months, spending holidays, birthdays, and missing major family events. Jones resided at Mr. Combs' residence in Los Angeles, California, and Miami, Florida, spent several weeks on a yacht rented by Mr. Combs in the U.S. Virgin Islands and St. Bartholomew, and made several trips with Mr. Combs to New York City. Jones alleges that disturbing incidents began nearly immediately after he joined Combs' team. On approximately September 12, 2022, Jones alleges that he was present at Chalice Recording Studio in Los Angeles when Combs and Justin shot an unidentified man. Wow. And that Jones, let's go to the next page, and that Jones provided first aid services to the victim. Jones also alleges that he and other witnesses were pressured to hide the shooting from the police and the public. So this producer who worked with Diddy from September of 2022 to September 2023 on his album Love is saying that he witnessed a shooting that allegedly Sean Combs did. And he says, I was told that I had to hide it. I rendered first aid services. So that's very grisly. Like, that's very dark. So Jones alleges that throughout his time living with Mr. Combs, Mr. Jones was the victim of constant unsolicited and unauthorized groping and touching of his arms by Mr. Combs, and that he was forced to work in Mr. Combs' bathroom as Mr. Combs walked around naked and showered. Combs allegedly used access to powerful individuals in the music industry, including producer Stephen Aaron Jordan, or Stevie J, to groom and entice Mr. Jones to engage in homosexual acts, including by sharing a video with Jones of who he claims was Stevie J doing another act that I'm not going to say on this channel. So in addition, Combs promised to make sure that Mr. Jones wins Producer of the Year at the Grammys if he engaged in these alleged acts. So Christina Koren was allegedly aware of and attempted to downplay Combs' misconduct and worked with Mr. Combs to groom Jones into accepting a homosexual relationship. Jones alleges that other individuals in Combs' orbit committed sexual misconduct against him as well. For example, on Thanksgiving Day 2022, Jones alleges that he was assaulted by Jane Doe 1 while he was staying in Combs' house in Miami, Florida. Jones also alleges that he was assaulted by Gooding when Combs left them alone together in a makeshift studio on his yacht. So during his time working for Combs, Jones was transported from California to New York, Florida, St. Bartholomew, and the United States Virgin Islands. And while accompanying Combs to the various locations, Jones was allegedly coerced into participating in commercial inappropriate acts against his will. Combs allegedly forced Jones to solicit other workers and perform other acts, and he lists those here. So this is another person who is coming out of the woodworks and is alleging that they are a victim of Sean Combs' acts of predatory acts. We have seen this with women coming forward, but it's not just women. It's women and men who are coming forward and saying that they were forced to do these things. This has been a really difficult topic to cover on this channel. It's a topic that is very important, and we're bringing these filings and legal news to our community because we do want you to be informed of what is going on and to keep up to date. But we also understand that this is very triggering content for some individuals. So please always feel free to do what you need to do in terms of if you do not wish to watch this content. Please always know that we do our best to be sensitive when talking about it, but we do understand that this content can be triggering for some of our audience, and we certainly invite you to join other of our live streams if that is the case. So essentially, the court lays out a number of very specific examples of what Jones has alleged. Jones states that Combs used his power and influence to intimidate and force Jones into performing these actions. This included promising Jones a Grammy for Producer of the Year for the Love album, $250,000 to purchase all the instruments he wanted, ownership of Combs' $20 million property in Miami, and access to record label executives, as well as threatening Mr. Jones with physical harm. So it seems like he was like, he's giving me both the sugar cube and the smack, because he's he's alleging that Combs promised him all this money, he would be Producer of the Year, but also threatening him allegedly with physical harm as well. So the threats took various forms, including threatening to eat Mr. Jones's face. Wow. Okay. Informing Jones that Combs was willing to kill his own mother so he wouldn't think twice about harming Mr. Jones, displaying his guns in front of Jones and bragging about getting away with shooting people, and telling Jones that Combs, head of security, had the power to make people and problems disappear. Wow. Okay. So during the production of the album, Combs allegedly required his employees to consume alcohol and dismissed them if they refused, further stoking Jones's fear of what could happen to him if he told Mr. Combs no. So, a lot of this talk about grooming, which is a word that's, has become much more prevalent. There's been a lot more about grooming, and it is really about a power dynamic. And that's what Jones is alleging in his complaint, that there really was this power dynamic of Mr. Combs, of Sean Combs, and it really was something that put him into this whirlwind of, being fearful for saying no to him and not having the ability to operate according to his own free will is what he's alleging. So the next part of Jones's complaint, according to the court here is relating in his opinion that in addition to Jones's various claims of sexual misconduct, he also alleges that he was not compensated for his time living with Mr. Combs or for the songs that Jones produced. Jones claims that this violated the terms under which he was recruited to work on the Love album, which included $20,000 up front for each song he produced, 4 royalty points, credits, as producer and for each instrument he played on the songs, and retention of publishing rights. When Jones confronted Combs about this, Combs allegedly offered him $20,000 in total compensation, which Jones refused. Procedural background. So Jones brought this action on February 26, 2024, and filed the operative complaint on April 12, 2024. Jones voluntarily dismissed his claims against certain defendants on May 14, 2024. The court thereafter denied a request by those defendants to impose sanctions on Jones and his counsel. Sean Combs, Global Enterprises, and Love Records moved to dismiss the operative complaint on August 26, 2024, and filed a supporting memorandum of law. Christina Coram moved to join that motion on the same day. Jones opposed that motion on September 30, 2024, and the Combs defendants replied on October 18, 2024. Coram also requested permission to join in the Combs defendants' reply brief. Coram did not file her own motion or memorandum of law. So the legal standard we talk about, this is a motion to dismiss, which means it's a preliminary motion. So we're at the preliminary stages of the litigation. Typically, courts will allow, plaintiffs to make amendments to their complaint, just like we're seeing here, where we're already at the Second Amendment complaint, as opposed to outright dismissing a claim. The courts, I've noticed, especially federal courts, under the federal rules of civil procedure, they will be somewhat lenient and not want to dismiss a claim outright without giving the opportunity to cure. They call it to cure any deficiencies. So essentially then the court goes on to state in its opinion that to survive a motion to dismiss, a plaintiff must state enough facts to state a claim to relief that is plausible on its face. And a claim is plausible when the plaintiff pleads factual content that allows the court to draw the reasonable inference that the defendant is liable for the misconduct alleged. So, before addressing the substance of Jones' claims, the court finds it necessary to issue a warning to his counsel, Tyrone Blackburn. Previously, the court declined to impose sanctions on Blackburn related to the admittedly false claims that he filed on behalf of Jones against Universal Music Group and associated defendants. So while Blackburn may have acted incompetently at times, the court determined that there was insufficient evidence to conclude that he engaged in a pattern of bad faith. Blackburn also has a pending referral to the Southern District's disciplinary committee for his repeated failure to investigate basic elements of his cases. Okay, so this is important to take a breath. So there are ethical rules that govern attorney practice, okay? And there are committees or ethics committees in each state, disciplinary boards in each state that are responsible for addressing any complaints that come in about different attorney misconduct or alleged unethical conduct, right? So based on what this judge is saying, there's already a referral to one such committee for this attorney, Tyrone Blackburn. That does not mean that there's been any determination yet by the ethics board, disciplinary review board, as to whether or not Tyrone Blackburn acted unethically or violated any of the rules of professional conduct, but there is a referral, and the judge is referencing that, and the judge is also saying that these claims that Mr. Blackburn, the attorney, did file against the other defendant were false, and I want to warn him again about his conduct here. So in light of this, the court finds much of Blackburn's conduct regarding defendant's motion to dismiss to be unsettling. Blackburn's filings are replete with inaccurate statements of law, conclusory accusations, and inappropriate ad hominem attacks on opposing counsel. For example, in urging the court to consider a grand jury indictment of Combs on related criminal charges, Blackburn writes, quote, as evidenced by U.S. Attorney Williams' press conference and the grand jury indictment, defendant Sean Combs and the Combs RICO enterprise are presumed guilty of being a RICO criminal organization. That any licensed member of the bar would espouse such an absurd understanding of the law is not just disturbing, but shocking. Then, rather than focusing on the claims pleaded in this lawsuit, Blackburn writes that it is evident from the multiple civil lawsuits and the 14-page indictment the kind of sexually deviant monster Sean Combs is. Both the operative complaint and Blackburn's opposition brief are full of similar irrelevant insults, misstatements, and exaggerations. In response to defense counsel's understandable objections, Blackburn hurls schoolyard taunts at them, writing that it is clear that defense counsel are obsessed with me, and although initially flattering, their obsession has become creepy. So, wow, that does come across as very off-putting and very immature, in my opinion. It can certainly come across as very off-putting to a court that Tyrone Blackburn is behaving in these kind of what the court is calling childish schoolyard taunts. So I want to back up here and look at this. It's one of the things that really is, in the court's opinion, pretty outrageous, and I tend to agree with that, is that the attorney, Tyrone Blackburn, wrote that the U.S. Attorney's press conference and the grand jury indictment against defendant Sean Combs indicates that he's presumed guilty. And that's not true. I mean, we even laymen and women who are not attorneys, it's just a common parlance in our society. You're innocent until proven guilty, right? We are all presumed innocent until we are proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's a very high standard. They apply a very stringent, heightened standard for burden of proof in criminal cases. You have to be proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So the prosecution has to prove all elements of the criminal claim charges brought against the individual. Okay. So that is a misstatement of law. And I can certainly understand why that would be objected to by Sean Combs' counsel. So the court has inherent authority to sanction Blackburn should he act in bad faith, vexatiously, wantonly, or for oppressive reasons. So while the court will not hold Blackburn's antics against Jones, the client, at this point, it warns Blackburn that further misconduct may lead to sanctions or to referral for discipline, because a court can refer an attorney for discipline as well. So Blackburn has a professional obligation both to the court and to his client to state the law accurately, to collaborate in a respectful and constructive manner with fellow lawyers, and to allow this litigation to proceed efficiently. The court will not hesitate to enforce this obligation moving forward. Okay, so basically, it's very important to digest what the court has said here. He's reminding the judge is reminding this attorney that you have not only an obligation to this court to be honest, to be candid, to be respectful and professional in your dealings before this court, but you also have that same obligation to the other parties, right? So then we talk about the RICO claim. Jones's first federal claim is for violations of RICO, which makes it unlawful to deploy the proceeds of racketeering activity in any enterprise, to participate in the conduct of such enterprise's affairs through a pattern of racketeering activity, or to conspire to do so. To establish a RICO claim, a plaintiff must show a violation of the statute, an injury to business or property, and causation. The defendants argue that Jones has not pleaded an injury to business or property caused by such a violation and therefore lacks standing under the act. And when they say lacks standing, they're saying that he doesn't meet the requisite requirements to have the ability to even bring this claim against Sean Combs. So a compensable injury to business or property encompasses specific pecuniary losses, and they're saying he does not allege that. Such a compensatory injury must also be caused by predicate acts sufficiently related to constitute a pattern, for the essence of the violation is the commission of these acts in connection with the conduct of an enterprise. So then we say The Supreme Court has set out so then the court says the Supreme Court has set out general principles surrounding this statute. So let me go ahead and flip the page here. The court here is bound by the Supreme Court precedent, right? This federal trial judge, he has to follow the law as set forth by the United States Supreme Court. And so therefore he is citing that authority in this opinion. So the court then goes on to state that the Supreme Court has set out general principles surrounding the RICO statute, one of which is that RICO is to be read broadly, not only because of Congress's self-consciously expansive language and overall approach, but also because of Congress's express admonition that RICO is to be liberally construed to effectuate its remedial purposes. So at the same time, balanced against this is the principle that's also recognized by the Supreme Court that legal liability should not extend as far as factual causation, and that allowing liability to become so broad would set society on edge and fill the courts with endless litigation, right? So applying these principles to the operative complaint here, the judge then goes on to say, most of Jones's alleged injuries from supporting RICO standing, including his claims of trauma, mental health problems, emotional pain and suffering, and embarrassment and humiliation. That's what he's mostly claiming. Nor can Jones base standing to bring a RICO claim on secondary economic consequences of these personal injuries, such as difficulty finding employment. Defendants are therefore correct that the only compensable injury that Jones pleads is defendant's non-payment for his work on the Love album. Defendants are also correct that their alleged refusal to honor the contract with Jones is not itself a RICO predicate act, even if the contract breach resulted from Jones' refusal to participate in Combs' alleged racketeering scheme. Okay? So the question then is whether any of the other alleged RICO predicates or the pattern of racketeering activity as a whole caused defendants' failure to pay Jones under the putative contract. The court cannot identify any such causal link. Defendants' alleged sex, drug, and gun trafficking activities, the vast majority of the predicate acts pleaded in the operative complaint, did not foreseeably or naturally preclude defendants from honoring their recording contract with Jones. Indeed, Jones's own theory of why he felt pressured to go along with Combs' sex, drug, and firearm-related misconduct for so long is that he believed that he would be compensated not only under his contract, but in additional benefits like securing Grammy Awards, purchasing $20 million homes, participating on future projects, $250,000 cash payments, and meeting influential music industry executives. Nor can Jones base standing on the motion the defendants fraudulently induced him to enter the contract in the first place. Because RICO compensates only for injury to business or property, a victim who is induced up to part with his property by the misrepresentations of a fraudster is generally not entitled to benefit of the bargain damages, meaning recovery of what the fraudster promised as opposed to the property the victim lost. Okay. So Jones also fails to plead any facts from which the court could infer the defendants never intended to perform under the contract in the first place. So this is very interesting here. The court is essentially saying, Sean Combs' lawyers, they make sense. They have some valid arguments that, he doesn't meet the standing to sustain this RICO claim. So the court says that Jones identifies no specific examples of fraud occurring after the formation of his contract that reduced the value of the contract or caused defendants' failure to pay. While Jones repeats the word fraud throughout the operative complaint, he appears to often do so as a synonym for illegal, and does not identify any specific misrepresentations related to his contract, because fraud is misrepresentations that are made. In sum, the court concludes that whether or not Jones has adequately alleged the existence of a RICO enterprise, he has not tied the activities of that enterprise to defendant's breach of contract or any other business or property harm incurred by Jones. It also bears reiterating that Jones fails to address any of these arguments in his opposition brief, and while the court prefers to decide issues on the merits, it should not be necessary to root around a 402-page complaint to contrive novel arguments on Jones' behalf. Oh my gosh. And then they cite to a case, a federal case, where the court says that this court may and generally will deem a claim abandoned when a plaintiff fails to respond to a defendant's arguments that the claim should be dismissed. Okay. So Jones's effort to convert a garden variety breach of contract case into a RICO suit therefore fails. So the court is ruling against music producer Jones and ruling in favor of Sean Combs in this one respect. So, and I think that's really interesting that they cite that case where it says the court may and generally will deem a claim abandoned when they fail to respond to a defendant's arguments that the claim should be dismissed. So then his RICO claims are dismissed as to the Combs defendants and Coron, right? So the court is dismissing Jones's RICO claims that have been filed against the Combs defendants and Christina Coron. So then we have another type of claim, a TVPA claim. Jones next asserts TVPA claims against Combs Coron and Combs Global. The TVPA is a law which makes it unlawful to recruit, entice, harbor, transport, provide, obtain, maintain, patronize, or solicit by any means a person knowing or in reckless disregard of the fact that means of force, threats of force, fraud, coercion, or any combination of such means will be used to cause the person to engage in a commercial sex act. The statute does not define terms like entice or recruit, so courts have given those terms their ordinary meaning, holding that they cover conduct ranging from attracting a victim by offering something that arouses hope or desire to somehow securing the services of a victim. The term coercion is defined as threats of serious harm to or physical restraint against any person, any scheme, plan, or pattern intended to cause a person to believe that failure to perform an act would result in serious harm to or physical restraint against any person, or the abuse or threatened abuse of law or the legal process. The term commercial sex acts means, and the judge goes in to describe all of the definitions and the jurisdictional components of the act, right? So given the TVPA's breadth, so on the next page, the court in its opinion says, given the TVPA's breadth, right? Breadth meaning it's all encompassing expansive scope, right? Jones has adequately pleaded violations as to Combs. On numerous occasions, Combs allegedly recruited or enticed Jones to solicit and perform sex acts with commercial sex workers, as well as transported Jones across state and international borders in order to do so. Combs allegedly secured Jones' compliance with his requests both by promising economic benefits that never materialized and by threatening Jones with physical restraint and harm. Because the operative complaint is lengthy and includes multiple examples of conduct adequate to ground a TVPA claim, the court here lists only a representative sample. And then the court goes ahead and lists these examples, which we don't need to go through all of it. So basically, the court is saying, I ruled against Jones on the RICO claim, but I do find that he has stated a sufficient claim for violation of TVPA. Finally, Jones adequately alleges that direct sexual assaults committed by Jones himself were commercial for purposes of the TVPA. So the court is ruling in his favor in that regard. So then, next, says defendants made two main arguments. Defendant argues that Combs' threats and promises were so outlandish that they failed to meet the general requirement that pleadings be plausible, as well as the TVA's specific requirement that coercion be assessed from the standpoint of a reasonable person in the same circumstances. And the court disagrees. So the court outright says, I disagree. It's not just what Combs said that supports an inference of fraud. The context and history of Combs and Jones's professional relationship imports a degree of legitimacy of materiality to the statements. Okay. So, second, in arguing against the TVPA claim, The defendants argue that Jones fails to provide dates for some of Combs' threats and promises, and that Jones fails to link those threats and promises to specific sex acts. Defendants therefore argue that because no specific threat is causally linked to any sex act, Jones fails to establish TVPA liability. Setting aside for specific dated allegations of Combs drugging and restraining Jones to secure his compliance, defendants are correct that Jones does not connect most of Combs' verbal threats to specific acts on specific dates. However, while a causal relationship is required, Jones's allegations suffice to plead one here. Okay? So the court is finding essentially in sum in favor of the plaintiff in those regards. So then the court goes on to address the claims with respect to Christina Karin. Also, and in conclusion, the court says this is interesting how they set this out, how they laid it out here. So, excuse me. So in conclusion, the court says that Jones has not yet, it says Jones, for the foregoing reasons, the Combs defendant's motion to dismiss is granted in part and denied in part. The motion is granted as to Jones' RICO claims, negligent and intentional infliction of emotional distress claims, and contract claims. The motion is also granted as to Jones' TVPA claims against Combs Global. The motion is otherwise denied. So in essence, the court allowed the claims against Sean Combs for TVPA violations to remain in the complaint, but as against the other defendant, the court said I'm dismissing it, and dismissed the RICO claims as well. And so really the most important aspect of this is that, the court warned Jones's attorney to knock it off. And the warning came in opinion, where U.S. District Judge Oathen, where he was ruling on Lil Rod Jones Jr.'s lawsuit, alleging that he was forced to have unwanted sex with Combs, as well as the hip-hop star's associates and sex workers, while producing the Love album Off the Grid from 2002 to 2023. So friends, let me know what you guys think. This one was a really interesting twist on what we've seen so far, because we've seen federal judges being really hard on Sean Combs, and and rightly so. But really, the court is getting down to the nitty gritty here and saying, the plaintiffs, of course, do need, these civil cases, they need to meet their burden. They have to state the appropriate elements, and we just covered also. Ryan Reynolds on this channel. I literally just went live earlier today in regards to Ryan Reynolds' lawsuit. Motion to dismiss, where he's moving to dismiss Justin Baldoni's lawsuit against him, saying that Justin Baldoni didn't state adequate claims against him for defamation and other claims. So there's a lot of moving to dismiss going on in the Hollywood entertainment world here. So go ahead and subscribe to our channel, where we bring you all of the entertainment news via live streams.